I'm excited now to introduce Aldana Velez. She's the managing editor of the International Journalist Network, ICFJ's website that delivers the latest on global media, innovation, news apps and tools, and professional opportunities in 8 languages, I think 3 or 4 of which she speaks. Aldana previously worked on audience and community engagement at Document in New York and Economia Feminista in Buenos Aires. Based in DC, Aldana also writes about US politics for the Argentine newspaper Página 12, was a membership puzzle project research assistant, as well as one of the translators for the Spanish edition of the membership guide. Aldana has been an incredibly valued part of the membership puzzle project team in many forms, and we're excited to have Aldana here with us today moderating. Thanks, Aldana.
Thank you, Ariel, for that introduction. This is a session we're going to talk about having plans back in February 2020, and then having to change those because of the pandemic happening. And I'm sure this sounds familiar to probably everyone in the world. You're going to hear about 2 experiences. The first one from Daily Maverick in South Africa. They will share how they shifted from in-person events to webinars and what they've learned since then, after hosting more than 120 of them. And then VT Digger in the US will share how they turned their spring membership drive into an opportunity to bring the community together and support essential workers. So let me introduce you to Fran Byton and Nicole Williamson from Daily Maverick. For those of you who don't know, the Daily Maverick is a national digital publication from South Africa. They focus on policy analysis and investigative journalism. And they launched membership in 2018, and it has been one of the strongest and most successful membership programs and a hallmark for newsrooms outside the US and Western Europe that are pursuing paywall-less membership. Fran is the general manager of Maverick Insider, their membership program, marketing and books. And Nicole has worked as events and webinars manager since May 2019. Fran, Nicole, take it away.
Hi, Aldana. Thank you so much for such a fantastic intro. You make us sound very impressive. We're really excited to be here today to talk to you about our webinars. Nick is going to actually share her screen and start the presentation. I think.
I'm going to start now. Okay. You should be seeing it shortly. Can you see it?
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Okay. So thanks to everybody for joining us today. We can talk a lot about webinars, so I hope we don't run over time. When we started our membership journey with Maverick Insider, we surveyed our members and asked them what was it that they wanted as a major benefit. And the overarching theme was they wanted interaction with our journalists. So live events became a huge component of what our membership could do. And then the pandemic hit, and suddenly all our great and grand plans for continued engagement with our members fell away. And we really did have a pandemic panic. We weren't just panicked as to how we were going to continue to connect with our audience, but also we were aware that with a pandemic, there would be financial implications, and that membership was likely to be one of the things that would go off people's lists of essentials. So for us, we needed our members and readers to feel the connection with us was invaluable. One of our biggest issues after that, after we decided that we would bring all our events online, was that a lot of our audience didn't know what a webinar was. They'd never heard of a webinar. And so we literally had a captive audience who were in full level 5 lockdown, and we needed to educate them on what we were going to do, that this wasn't what had traditionally been thought of as a webinar, which was some marketing speak from the marketing manager of a big corporate pushing a product, but really live journalism events online. And there was quite a lot of training we had to do with our audience, giving them step-by-step guides of how to join. And the two biggest important aspects here were that we wanted to keep them free for everybody, particularly at that time. And we also, we wanted it to be easy for them, that they would just be able to click and join, understand what it was. And in order for the readers to really value what they were having or what they were partaking in, they needed to experience it. So by the choice to keep them free was easier to access, was easier to experience, and we hoped, we prayed that that would build loyalty. At the time, there was a lot of panic around about the pandemic. Nobody knew what was happening. And we were able to, at that point, really bring the experts across the world to our readers and have their questions answered, which was an invaluable component that we'd never been able to do in any other area of our journalism before. It had always been filtered through a journalist, but here we had our readers and our members asking the questions directly themselves. So we decided that we wanted to host them ourselves in order to have complete control. We were always very proud of the events that we'd held at Daily Maverick. There was, and by having them on Webinar Jam, we'd be able to market all our future webinars, and to remember that getting those emails was absolute gold to us. And the reason we didn't do it on social like so many others had done is that we fundamentally believe that those on social are not actually interacting with you. They're interacting with Facebook or they're interacting with Twitter. And we didn't want to have the noise of social media. We wanted it to be a conversation that we could ask our readers and members to feel special and they could engage with. That has actually, what's come about from doing it that way is that we've actually created a new funnel for our audience who to become members. We did some looking back and another survey, and we discovered that only 50% of our webinar list were actually newsletter subscribers to Daily Maverick, and only 20% were members. So now we're able to put membership marketing to them and keep our webinars free for them. So deciding on the content, the most important thing was to uphold the Daily Maverick integrity of our journalism here. And it's very difficult when you have lots of sponsors seeing these big numbers of people coming in. And we really had to make sure that this wasn't sponsored content. So we had, Nicole and I did a very close collaboration with the editorial team. What did they feel were the great subjects that would work well in a webinar? We surveyed our audience, we got feedback from the webinar chat log and breaking stories, and suddenly our timetable started to build out and we were doing 3 webinars a week. From that, we'd get special edition newsletters stemming from the questions, where there was just so many questions coming in and so much engagement that actually we were able to have dedicated newsletters on that subject. Or alternatively, we realized, okay, every single one of these webinars now needs to be covered and become its own article and have the recordings put out for free. One of the absolute highlights for me certainly was when we actually had our Maverick Insider involvement. Early on, we needed some experts to join us for a panel discussion on COVID. And we looked into our member database of experts, and sure enough, we had a world-renowned virologist, and we also had a doctor who had worked in the Ebola crisis, and who were both more than happy to come on and be panelists and have the insiders asking insiders questions. And for me, I still call that my insider ecstasy moment, where the whole ecosystem of membership came together. So we have various familiar formats that we decided, and this was something that, you know, the potential for the webinar format exploded for us, and categorizing was important, not just for us, but also for our audience to understand, okay, this is going to be a book launch, or it's a Scorpio Scoop, which is a breaking investigation. We'd have post-screening Q&As for documentary filmmakers, and then various series or inside track conversations. So that's when we would have various experts come and let our audience speak to them directly. And then we just started experimenting with having Maverick Insider exclusives. So those are webinars that are just for our members. We've only had one so far, but the idea behind that is that there's no breaking news there. There's no information that the whole world needs to know. This is really behind the scenes, asking the journalists how they went about doing their investigations. And the sponsors, they say if you build it, they will come. And I'm very happy to report that in this case, it is true. We communicated a lot with our sales team, and we realized there were so many ways throughout Webinar Jam and our marketing that we could add value to a sponsor. And we started creating these webinar reports, which was showcasing just exactly how big the engagement was. And we made a decision early on that we wouldn't have a sponsor on the webinar. So if they were sponsoring it, they couldn't be a panelist, which caused our poor sales team much stress, but ultimately kept us away from it being sponsored content. We really wanted to respect our audience, and it's worked because our numbers have held, they have made it habitual. They think highly of our webinars, and it's worked for the sponsors too, because they also get it. They know that that's why people are coming on, is we aren't putting out sponsored content as a webinar. So far this year, we've managed to already achieve 71% of the sponsorship that we achieved in the total of 2020. And
Thanks, Fran.
I pass over to Nicole, who's going to get into the nitty-gritty with you.
Thanks, Fran. Hello, everyone. So how it works, you know, as Fran mentioned, there was a panic to connect in the beginning when we first started the webinars, and it was sort of, you know, a learning experience as we went. And as the webinars grew and as the list grew, we sort of had to pinpoint different engagement points, and, you know, see what worked best for our audience. So this is sort of what our reader engagement journey looks like at the moment. However, it is an ever evolving format, as is everything these days. So it's sort of a loop which starts the webinar newsletter. Our audience can then submit questions, which helps us get a better understanding of what content they want to hear from the webinar. We then use social media to drive signups into the live room. We have engagement within the live room. And then, as Fran mentioned, every article is written up and recorded. And then those recordings and articles are then shared again with all subscribers, as well as on the Daily Maverick website as well, and within various newsletters. So webinars, if you have the luxury of time, usually get about 6 weeks, 3 weeks marketing lead time. We did not have the space nor the luxury of time. As Fran mentioned, we were putting on 3 webinars a week in the beginning. So we had to be really clever with our marketing and, you know, find the places that were going to create the biggest impact as well. So we looked at, as the list grew, finding more ways to target relevant audiences. So there we use, you know, if we have a business themed webinar, we'll use our Business Maverick newsletter to market that webinar to the people who might be interested in hearing about it. And of course, as Fran mentioned as well, social media was still important because only 50% of the webinar subscribers were newsletter subscribers, which meant that we weren't going to reach all of them through our newsletters if that's where we were advertising. So we still do advertise on social media. And then, of course, we share marketing with our third-party panelists and sponsors as well to reach a wider audience. So the tech is one thing, but hosts and panelists make your show. And when I say that the training calls are non-negotiable, we still have a training call with every single panelist and host that we have on a webinar, which is now over 200. I think we're on webinar 122 was today. And Fran can jump in and tell you we've had some hair-raising moments where we've had to do between 8 and 10 test calls because connection.
I think what was extraordinary is this is something we didn't anticipate, and this was our biggest failure, I suppose, of the webinars, was that there was always going to be an issue, whether it be some sort of tech issue. There was no sound. We had everything that could have happened in a live event happened to us. We had blackouts. We had dogs barking to the point that the chat log was people saying, please show us your dog. It was really, really quite crazy. The pros, the guys who you think would be able to do this in their sleep, you know, they just hadn't thought about it. They just pitched up, and sure enough, they couldn't hear the questions. Nicole is furiously typing the answers that the panelists are saying so that the host can give follow-up questions. It was a nightmare, but what we did have is a really forgiving audience. And I think that, you know, admitting failure, telling people that you're working on it, that you're sorry about the tech issues, you're sorry about the sound issues, it actually goes a long way for people being very kind of kind to you. And it hasn't seemed to be something that has turned them away too much. So from our side, I think that one of the big learnings from that for us would be, don't be afraid to make the mistakes. The kind of mistakes can sometimes even be endearing.
And also, you know, through failure, you get better at planning, and you get better at having backup options, and you get better at using the WhatsApp back channel and stressing that with your host and your panelists and explaining the importance of that, streamlining template emails when you are prepping them for the call. As I'm sure a lot of all of you who were panelists today, you saw the email from Jakob. That's essentially what we have to do every time. And you realize that no one really likes to read, so you have to make sure that you're saying everything you need to say in as short a space of time, and follow up with a WhatsApp message to make sure that they've read everything and have understood. Library engagement points, as I said earlier, these we also experimenting with, seeing what works, seeing what doesn't, and capitalizing on the things that do. You know, and this is where Webinar Jam is also great. It's a wonderful platform for engagement. There's a lot of different avenues that you can use. There are polls, there are offers. You know, you can keep your eye on the comments. You can delete comments that might be hostile. You know, with some bigger topics, you might get a few trolls around, which you need to keep your eye on. So that's really important. And yeah, just keep experimenting, which we still do. If there was one slide that I could tell you to take a screenshot of, or I'm sure these will be shared with everyone, but these are the biggest takeaways that we've had to date. And as mentioned, still learning and changing as we go. And also what works for us and the tips and tricks that we found help us meet our objectives might be different to you. So again, if you're giving it a go, I would say the best thing here is to track, trace, alter, and scale. So keep testing your marketing, test with the audience, speak to your audience, survey them, never assume that everything is okay. Always check in, make sure that your panelists and hosts know that you're there for them. As Fran said, you know, you test the product before. We only reached our exclusive Maverick Insider webinar 115 webinars in. We had to make sure that it was something that, you know, would be a benefit to them. Internet, obviously, in South Africa, we have this thing called load shedding, where they just shut down our power for hours at a time. So always having a backup plan and make sure that you're checking in with them. And last but not least, don't be intimidated. It was Fran and I that started the webinars, just us two. And I think, yeah, I think one other person on the team. And we, you know, and also you can start small. So you don't, a big team does not necessarily indicate the level of success, as does the size of your audience. If you have a webinar and there are 100 people on, it's a fantastic form of engagement. And actually we find that the webinars with smaller audiences get amazing. You can answer more of their questions. So just give it a go. And
I would add in a little bit extra here with don't be intimidated. The one piece of advice, if webinars is something that you are looking at adding into your newsroom, is just make sure that you get somebody who's really, really passionate about to run it. Nicole has run all 122 webinars that we've held since April 1st last year. and she talks this enthusiastically about it all the time, which makes it really quite enjoyable.
So will we carry on? I know we need to wrap up. I can see Aldana on the screen. Yes, we indeed will be carrying on. It is a new editorial arm of Daily Maverick. We actually hit our record number of attendees just 2 weeks ago on the 18th of July. We had 2,067 attendees. And as Fran mentioned, we are on the road to achieving the same sponsorship. So, yep, that's us.
They're here to stay.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing this experience and all these lessons, all this knowledge that you've learned while doing and hosting these webinars. For the participants, please don't forget to write your questions for Fran and Nicole in the Q&A section. We're going to get to those. But first, we're going to hear from VT Digger. VT Digger is a non-profit newsroom that does watchdog reporting on state government, politics, consumer affairs, business, and public policy in Vermont, in the northeast of the United States. Membership has been a key part of their revenue mix for years, and their spring membership drive is one of the most important revenue drivers. They were preparing for their spring 2020 membership drive when the coronavirus arrived in the US, which caused the lockdown in much of the country and a tremendous economic impact. So they couldn't afford to skip the membership drive, but they knew that they had to change it. And Stacy Peters here is going to talk about what they did. Stacy oversees VT Digger's technology solutions to ensure business needs are aligned with the organization's editorial mission. Over to you, Stacy.
Hi, thank you for that, Aldana. I actually just want to start by saying that maybe we should just skip all this and go back and start a webinar series, because that was inspiring. So thanks to the Daily Maverick. So as Aldana mentioned, I'm Stacy. I handle technology for VT Digger. We have had membership in some form or another since we started the business in 2009. We spent the past 4 or 5 years really honing in on it. And by the time 2019 rolled around, we pretty much had it down to a science. Is my screen share working properly? Can you see the cute monkey?
You're great, Stacy.
Great, thanks. Over the past year, VT Digger has reached between 500,000 and 1 million readers every month in a state with a population just over 600,000. So when the pandemic really began in earnest early last year, we saw a massive increase in readership, and we wanted to be able to capture that. This is what our membership looked like in 2019. We had 2 major drives. One in the spring would run sometime in March or April, and a more dedicated fund at the end of the year that would run for 6 or 8 weeks with some little isolated sprints in the interim. The spring drive is the first we run every year. We really focus on it. We start planning it early in the year. We set a dollar goal and want to make sure that that it meets, the budget goal that we had set in the previous year. So we work hard to really establish that goal based on fact, and we meet that goal. We've always met it. We set a cash goal. We succeed based on value prop messages largely. So we want to let readers know where the impact was. We discuss and kind of resurrect some stories. We'll do some interviews with reporters and have them talk about it. We do a series of email blasts concerted with website posts and CTAs all over the website. We also have some intros in our podcast products. We make sure that that our daily email newsletter mentions it. We make sure that the messaging is consistent and everywhere, and really based on value and messaging in line with our organizational specific dollar goal, as I mentioned earlier, which we do so that we can count it down, and we do so that we can be transparent. We want our readers to know exactly how much money that we've budgeted and how much we need to raise. It also allows us to add some urgency as we tell our readers throughout the course of the campaign how much is left to go. And lastly, we offer some benefits to members that are quite popular among our members. Vermont is a very small place with a lot of tiny communities. So seeing someone else walk around with a trucker cap or a bumper sticker goes far with our readers. So that all looked great in 2019. Then we started to plan for spring 2020, where things didn't look so great. We couldn't accurately set that fundraising dollar goal as the economic situation was unfolding rapidly. Our entire business team works together to establish that goal. The membership team in 2020 included Florencio Terra, our membership coordinator, Libby Patterson, our community engagement director, and Galloway, our executive director, and me. So working together, we couldn't ask people to give us a specific amount of money because we weren't sure anybody had it. The benefits also seemed sketchy all of a sudden. We couldn't trust that manufacturers or fulfillment centers would be operating. We didn't know that the US mail would deliver. We didn't know that COVID couldn't be transmitted over surfaces or in the mail. So it didn't make sense for us to send stuff all over the place. And ethically, nothing was working, and we didn't want to clog the supply chain with hats and bumper stickers. And the messaging was also a problem. While we were doing tons of reporting around COVID, we couldn't talk about the value because that story was still rapidly unfolding. We also really didn't want to confuse our readers or make them think that we would stop reporting on COVID if we didn't meet our goal. So none of that was working. Everything we had learned was chucked out the window, and we had to rethink it. So here's what we did. We changed our goal from a dollar goal to a number goal. We wanted to reach 3,000 members. At Digger, we consider a member anybody who has given in any amount over the past 365 days. And on our donation page, we allow for any donation amount to be made, but we had set a default at $15 a month. We changed that in early 2020 to $5 a month in the hopes that we could get more people in at the lower level and then hopefully talk to them later on down the road when things panned out. We really felt that we could get 3,000 people to contribute at any level, and that would allow us to meet somewhere near the dollar goal that we needed to meet our operating budget. Establishing those relationships was the most important thing. When thinking about the benefit, as I mentioned, we didn't want to send stuff in the mail. And we did want to be able to continue to support the small businesses that we used when producing materials in the past. We partnered with a local glove manufacturer who had themselves pivoted. They began making cloth masks at the start of the pandemic. So we worked with them to produce masks that we would donate to hospitals. And our benefit became, for every donation that we received from a member, we would donate one mask courtesy of Vermont Glove to a local hospital. Our goal then, and our message, was that we wanted to donate 3,000 masks to local hospitals from 3,000 members within 30 days. We wanted to keep the campaign period short so that we could get it done and get out of our way and continue doing the work. As I mentioned, we had a lot to do, and this allowed us to keep our message focused, keep a sense of urgency around it, keep it simple, and just get the masks raised, which was a real need in our community. Our original plan was to complete the campaign, raise the funds for the masks, and deliver them after 30 days. But early feedback from readers expressed some concern. They wanted to make sure that we were getting the masks out ASAP. And we agreed with this. So we listened, and we began delivering them in batches as quickly as we raised the money and as quickly as the manufacturer could produce them. We then turned this around into subsequent member appeals, which allowed us to continue to our tradition of counting down how much we have left to raise, but counting down in terms of in a volume of masks and people and not money. This really inspired people and gave a sense of transparency and urgency to what we were doing. The other thing that happened throughout this campaign was was increased need that came in. So when we started, we called the list of all the hospitals in the area, offering to partner up and asking who needed masks. As you might imagine, hospitals were quite busy in early April 2020, so we didn't hear back from everybody, but we did hear back from some. We developed that short list. And over the course of the campaign, as other hospitals heard what we were doing, they called us asking to be added to the list. There was a shortage everywhere, as I'm sure I don't need to tell any of you. But it really allowed us to add that air of legitimacy, urgency, and community, most importantly. We did see over the course of the campaign that as we were adding hospitals, we would get more donations from the regions that those hospitals were in, from those communities. Thank you letters and photos began rolling in from hospitals, which we also put back to use. We would take these thank you letters from hospitals and these photos of hospital workers and patients wearing the masks, and we would turn those into future appeals to help us close the gap and get to the end of our campaign. And the results our community delivered. People really felt a sense of belonging and of participation in a way that they didn't in the past. We managed to raise a total of 3,050 donations for $291,000. When we were toying with the monetary budget goal in the early part of 2020, we were coming up with a goal around $250,000. So we did manage to make the goal that we had anticipated, and it was replicable. Our end of year annual fund drive last year used a lot of the same thinking. We partnered with the Vermont Food Bank and donated meals to families in need. We did a future campaign in the spring of this year where we partnered with a literary organization and gave books to children in need in the spring. And a few key takeaways. We had to really simplify the message with this one. In the past, as I'd mentioned, we would do a long pronounced campaign where we would have several different appeals and types of appeal to try and draw the attention of our various demographics. But we wanted to keep this one simple and consistent and keep out of our own way so that we could do the more important work of reporting. We wanted to share our progress. On the last day of our spring campaign, we were short by about 450 members. We sent one blast to our entire list of 46,000, which allowed us to close that gap within the business day. And lastly, we wanted to go beyond our base. Nearly 40% of our spring 2020 members came from out-of-state donors. That's up from an average of 8 to 10%. There were many second homeowners, family of Vermonters, and others who were interested in the coverage that just really stepped up during that time. That is what we did that was successful. We've spent the past year trying to figure out where we take it from here. Given the unpredictability still facing us, we would like to continue to solicit year-round so that we can include partners where we need, and we can focus on our own work during other times. We've built some technology funded by the Google News Initiative's Innovation Challenge Grant that allows us to better target user segments. So all of those who came through the door at $5 a month last spring, we can hit them and try to get them to up their donation to 10 or 15. We can better target appeals to that new out-of-state base that met with messages that resonate with them. We really hope that this allows us to grow our existing base and prevent the churn that we might see if and when, here's hoping, things ever slow down and get calm. And we also want to make sure that we're continuing to draw new members. As our readership continues to grow, we want to be able to speak to them in new ways. So we want to be able to speak to them while taking our existing members and acknowledging them and not hitting them for membership in the same very basic way. So that's what we did in a nutshell. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Stacey. I think this is a great example of not only what you did because of the pandemic, but just the idea of having this empathy of understanding this, that there is this crisis going on and that you just need to have the sensibility to respond to that, right? And I was wondering what aspects of this rethinking the benefits, or maybe even working with the community during this type of crisis is going to stay, or if you have like some kind of plan for the future of how to adopt that for the membership program at BT Bigger.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, we've worked with the Vermont Food Bank and with the Children's Literacy Organization to help support those local organizations as well. We definitely wanted to make sure that we were that our message was that we weren't forcing people to choose between supporting us, supporting essential workers, or supporting local businesses, all of whom were in crisis and all of which needed help. So that partnership was unique in that we could really package it and allow people to support all of that with one $5 donation. We love this idea. We love working directly with local businesses. We love being able to elevate the voices of other organizations in need. We don't always want to do it because sometimes we really want to focus on ourselves, of course, and because all of that comes, at cost, right? So we bought those masks from the glove company at cost. So it did dive into our own expenses a bit. So we want to make sure that there's a balance there, but we, as a non-for-profit, it's important, of course, that we continue to make sure that those voices are heard. And so we want to make sure that we are working directly with them wherever we can. It's a model that has really worked for us and allowed us to reach new audiences, especially in parts of the state that we haven't had great coverage in the past.
Thank you. I just wanted to remind everyone that they can leave their questions also in the Q&A section. I have a couple that I want to ask, but of course I want you to ask your questions so Fran, Nicole, and Stacy can answer them. And actually I have a question for Fran and Nicole, also thinking about the future. I know that in-person events were key to the membership program, and now you have these webinars that you have been implementing. I wonder if you are thinking about the future, how these two models can interact, how they can speak to each other, if that's going to happen, or any plans that you have.
Yeah, we absolutely are. I mean, the first thing I need to do is clone Nicole. And the idea behind one of the things that came out to us that was just something that we hadn't anticipated was how much our members and our readers in the kind of forgotten areas of South Africa appreciate these, and they are so loyal and they have made it habitual. And it's made me realize that we really can't leave them out again. So where our live events would be in the big cities, we're always going to have a hybrid component to it for our webinar audience at home. I think that people are dying to get back in a room and have that networking engagement with our journalists and with each other. But for those who can't make it, we will always be doing a hybrid model from now on. And I can't wait.
Thank you, Nicole. I don't know if you want to also add anything to it. Perfect. And now that you actually mentioned these other parts of the country that, of course, have benefited in a sense of this new model for events, I wonder how you were also including maybe people who don't have the best internet connection, or it's not as simple for them to connect to webinars as it is for other people, maybe. I wonder how you are thinking about them.
Yeah, I mean, web connection in South Africa is not easy at all. And it's, I mean, for us, what we can do from our side is just to continually keep them for free. You know, we didn't want to have that blocker where people had to pay to participate or be in these webinars. So by keeping them for free, making sure that we make the recordings available for free, the write-ups available for free, just like the rest of our journalism. You know, ultimately, it would be great if we could get our site and everything to do with us to cost no data at all. And it's something that we would definitely look into working on. But yeah, wherever there's an internet connection, you can get it for free. And that's all we can do, unfortunately, at the moment.
I think just to add to that, what's really beautiful to see in some of the webinars is how the community comes together. And I think it reflects South Africa in a way as well. In some of the webinars that speak to more rural areas, we see people actually coming together, and we see in the chat them saying, hi, these are the women from XYZ joining in, listening in from our neighbor's house. And it's really beautiful to see the community supporting each other and allowing each other to have access to the content where maybe they don't have internet in their home, but thinking of them and reaching out and allowing them to also engage with the experts and the panelists as well.
Thank you. And as I said before, I think that the great thing about these two examples, these two experiences, is that yes, they are about the pandemic, but they can translate to pivots during any major crisis, right? So just as a last question for all of you, I wonder, what did you learn that you can maybe implement in this type of scenario in the future? Or maybe what a kind of advice you want to give other publications that need to shift this suddenly also in the future?
I'll jump in first. I think one of the greatest, I mean, we're all in newsrooms, we're in news, there's constant change, there's constant crises happening. And I think that if I had to choose one piece of advice, it would be not to be scared of a MVP, a minimal viable product. You know, get out there and test it. Don't be afraid to make mistakes and experiment. Your audience will understand. And I think that change has this incredible results in making us have to think laterally and look at everything, how we were doing it, and find a completely new way of doing it. So just don't be intimidated by it. Embrace change.
I think I have to just jump in and really reiterate what Fran said. I remember so clearly at the beginning of lockdown last year, Fran phoned me and saying, Nick, I think we need to do 3 webinars a week. I had never done a webinar in my whole entire life. I had never run one online webinar. And I can honestly say that I used to be the most technically challenged person I know. So don't be afraid to try either. Embrace trying and keep trying and testing and tracking. It's one of the biggest things I think I've learned over the past year is, the data tells you what your audience wants. And I would say keep tracking, keep tracing, altering and scaling.
My response isn't going to be nearly as profound, but I would say listen to your readers. In our case, they were telling us what they wanted. That shift after about a week, when people were asking us when we were going to send masks, or they were assuming that we were sending them every day, really allowed us to up our game, because it gave us content that we could put back when we started to deliver masks and get results immediately from hospitals. So we listened intently. At first, it would have been easier for us to just continue our campaign, to send out the appeals that we had already written, and then to deliver the benefit at the end of the month. But when we made that change about a week in, it really added to the awareness of what we were doing in a big way. As I mentioned, especially in parts of our coverage area that we never really knew existed for a long time.
Perfect, thank you. And I think, Ariel, you can take it from here.